Right, a few more people in the room than I thought we might get, so that's a good start. For those that don't know me, I'm Stu Alban. For those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, for those that do, thanks for all the comments about looking like a normal human being for once instead of a scruffy old tramp. But yeah, here I am, and basically today we're going to look at the coaching structure, mostly aimed at the instructors. Tomorrow Martin's giving a presentation, slightly different to mine, probably about 3 times as long, no Martin. But his presentation will focus much more on how we've got to this stage and the kind of nuts and bolts of it. Whereas I'm here to just give you an overview what coaching is in terms of the qualification going forward. So hopefully a fairly short presentation, but plenty of room for questions if people have got them. So before we start, can I just have a quick show of hands? Anybody got any coaching qualifications outside of skydiving? Climbing? Andy? Motocross coach. Oh, what, sorry? Okay. So we've got a bit of a varied background in the room, which is good. And hopefully for you guys that have got coaching ratings from other sports or other kind of areas of life, some of this may actually sort of fall on ground that you're familiar with. And hopefully for the rest of you, it might be something a bit more kind of open for discussion about what coaching is traditionally, how we've seen it, compared to what coaching is in pretty much the rest of the world. So my background, as well as being a skydiving instructor and everything else, I'm also working for the fire service. I've got a level 5 diploma in coaching and mentoring for leadership and management. And I also form part of a small cadre of people nationally that coach future leaders for the fire and rescue services. None of that's really much good when it comes to skydiving, but actually the coaching ethos and how you actually sort of develop people is the same, regardless of whether you're teaching or coaching somebody for their job in their workplace or for their sports and hobbies at the weekend. So the traditional view of coaching then, probably what we all know in this room as coaching, is very much taking somebody and telling them how to do something and focusing on the technique. Would that be a fair sort of assumption? Is that how you define coaching in the room? That tends to be the focus for a lot of sports. But what's been happening over the last sort of decade or so, the other side of coaching, on the management leadership side, has actually had that the other way around. The coach is much more somebody who's there to facilitate and provide an environment for whoever's being coached to actually identify their own development, their own learning, and almost teach themselves in that supported environment. And certainly over the last 10 years or so, you might have seen a bit of a sea change in coaching at top level of sports for things like rugby, football, where the coach or the head coach is very much not there to teach technique. They're much more there to provide that environment, give the encouragement, and allow the players to actually develop both individually and as a team. And that's kind of where we're trying to go to. So the fancy title is a Level 2 Certificate in Coaching Skydiving Foundation Skills. I apologise for the very long title. That was my doing because it took First for Sport an awful long time to get the head around the difference between a foundation coach in other sports, which is an assistant coach, and what we're coaching. So in the end, we settled on coaching foundation skills. So if a coach is somebody who provides an environment and helps people to develop by asking the right questions, a mentor, which is another term that gets bandied around quite a lot, is kind of the opposite to that. Somebody who actually is a trusted guide, who's there to give advice and actually tell rather than ask. So the difference between coaching and mentoring is, as a coach, you'll be asking a lot of questions and letting the person you're coaching come up with the answers for themselves. As a mentor, generally, you're giving a much more instructional way of delivering that information. Now, it's important to recognise that you'll flip-flop between the two as coaches, especially when you're dealing with people who are at the bottom end of their skydiving career. So when there's a heavy focus and emphasis on technique, you'll have to switch to mentoring in order to be able to do the coaching. But the important thing to remember about the difference between the two of them is that when it comes to debriefing and the learning phase and the reflection, that should always default to coaching. So, whether we like it or not, whether we're aware of it or not, as coaches or even as experienced jumpers, we are a role model for those people coming up through the sport. It's our choice as to whether we're a positive role model or a negative one. But we're all role models. So in order to be the role model that you want to be, i.e. somebody who's positive and sets a good example, you need to understand that you're an ambassador for the sport and for British skydiving as a whole. But you're also an ambassador for your own PCO. More importantly, you're an ambassador for your own brand. And I use that term very loosely. But if you want to be trusted as a coach, you need to demonstrate the behaviours and the coaching ethos all the time. There's absolutely no point spending all day in the drop zone being Mr. Nice and coachy and then going to the bar and being Mr. Idiot. Because people can't differentiate between the two. And let's face it, I think most of us in the room have been guilty of that at some point. You're there to act as a leader. People coming through the sports, when they're looking for coaching at whatever level, need somebody to lead them. And again, you can choose to be a positive leader or a negative one. And history is littered with all sorts of examples of both. Just because somebody can be quite a negative leader doesn't mean that they can't be successful. But generally, the people that, or the leaders that take people with them tend to be the ones that are remembered much more fondly. And certainly I know that's how I'd like to be remembered as we go forward. Most of all, you need to gain trust and respect. The people you're coaching need to trust you and need to respect you. Otherwise, all the advice you're giving, all the questions you're asking is kind of wasted. So that's the role of the coach, is to be that leader, that ambassador, and that trusted and respected person that people who want coaching will feel safe to go to. And we use the term safe a lot these days. It's something that we're starting to become a lot more aware of when it comes to actually providing an environment that's the right environment for people to learn in. So how do you do that? Firstly, by extolling the virtues of both the sport and the discipline that you're choosing to coach. Outline just how much fun these people can have with the new skills they've learnt. Find out what's their motivation. Why do they want to get that FS1 sticker? Why do they want to go and learn to free fly? Or whatever other discipline you're coaching. Find out what it is that's driving them to do that. Tap into that and then help them to find their enjoyment through that. And you'll keep them in the sport a damn sight longer. One of the big shifts with this qualification is a move from traditional coach-centred methodology to a more person-centric style of coaching. And again, this is where the shift has happened in sport over the last 10 to 15 years or so, where things have started looking much more at the individuals and the coach being there to facilitate their environment and allow them to learn, rather than a coach-centric style which focuses much more on drills, on a disciplined approach, and on an approach whereby the coach is in charge. When we move to a person-centric coaching style, it gets a little bit more chaotic. As a coach, you've got to give up some of that control, help them to learn through play, help them to identify their own goals and their own path, rather than you actually sort of directing them and pushing it, which can be a really, really uncomfortable place to be. Especially as instructors, we tend to be the ones at the front of the room laying down what needs to be done. When you start to coach, that changes, and actually you're there much more to be in that uncomfortable space of allowing them to learn, but being there to sort of catch them when they fall, if you pardon the pun. The examples on the right are two really good examples of this. Football has changed coaching-wise massively over the last sort of 10 years or so, and both of those pictures show coaches who have coached their teams to defeat and victory. But they've done that in a non-judgmental way. It's not about whether their team wins or whether their team loses. It's about identifying the growth and the learning they can get from both of those situations and helping those players develop to be better next time. Neither of those coaches teach their players how to kick a ball, how to take a penalty, how to score goals, how to take corners, how to dive around and roll around like they're injured for 40 minutes. That's not their job. Their job is to set the environment and set the tone so that their players can actually use their natural abilities and the skills they've already learned to work better as a team and as players. Now, the boundaries between coaching and instructing is that as instructors, we're there to teach people from scratch with no knowledge of the sport and make sure they progress safely and develop the skills to stay alive, be safe, and be able to jump on their own. As coaches, we're then stepping into that next bit of space where we're helping them to build on the skills they've already learnt and help them to enjoy their newfound skills, still in that safe environment. So that's where that flip-flopping between coaching and mentoring will come in, especially in the early stages. As you develop more as a coach and you start taking on teams, it becomes much more about dealing with the personalities in the team and allowing that jigsaw to fit together. So where are we now? Well, the working group started about 2 years ago to actually look at the whole coaching structure we've got within British Skydiving. It's no secret that we've probably got hundreds and hundreds of coaches out there, far more coaches than we got people actually receiving coaching. So there's a bit of a mismatch there between people getting their coach ratings and actually going out and doing the job. There's no plans to remove the current coach ratings. So if you hold a rating for any discipline at the moment, you'll still be able to use that. That's not even on the table. Anybody coming forward, CIs, examiners will still be allowed to give out the coach ratings as are. So there's no change to that. What we hope will happen is an evolution over time where people see the benefits of the new course with a proper professional qualification involved, that people will start drifting that way and we'll see that sea change, and slowly the customers will then follow because they know they're getting a good product. So anybody that's got coach ratings, don't worry, you can still use them. However, that doesn't mean you can't come and do the new qualification as well. The instructor working group's also looking at how we can use the learning we've identified from the coaching structure that we've developed and build that into our instructor courses going forward. The BI course has worked really well for the last 30, 40 years. It's turned out some really good instructors, despite some of the examiners, and I hold my hands up to that one. But basically, it's worked. So we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But what the instructor working group's doing is looking at how we can incorporate this coaching style much more into instruction, so that our instructors going forward are better equipped to deal with the students and coach them through their courses. What this does as well is it actually gives a career pathway for people for the first time who wish to be coaches in skydiving but don't wish to become instructors. So this will give you a formal qualification. There will be a baseline standard, so it's consistent across the board. And from this course, which we started end of last year, we've run 2 courses so far. The first one, a very small course, just to try out the content, suggest changes and make adaptations, to the first proper course we ran at the British Skydiving offices back in, I think, was it October, Rich? Around about October, where we invited several examiners to come down and actually partake in the course. And I'm pleased to say from that first cohort, the first 2 people have actually got their learner packs and all their evidence together, and will now be formally awarded their certificate. I'm not going to embarrass them, but the names are Vic and Bex. Moving on from that, this year will run the first series of courses for British Skydiving members. So at the moment in my diary, I've got around about 4 or 5 courses set aside. It's a 3-day course, so obviously that's quite a bit of time in terms of input. The last day generally being the in-air phase where we do the evaluations for whichever discipline you're coaching. Starting this year, I'll also be looking to put together the next stage, which is the advanced coach level. Now currently that sits at level 2 also, so there's no change in qualification. However, we're having discussions about that at the moment, and depending on how much of an effort it would be to get it changed in terms of making it a level 3 qualification, then that may be an option too. So we've actually got a clear structure and a clear framework for people to actually improve their skills. The advanced coach phase will focus much more on safety management at larger events, including load organising, multi-aircraft loads, that kind of thing. And also go much more into depth around scratching the surface really, but much more in depth than the normal coaching course around things like sports psychology and team building and team dynamics. So these are the coaches that will then go on to be coaching people for national championships, organising big events, and taking some of that burden off the chief instructors by being able to be consistent and almost a kind of like a guaranteed product, if you like. Because once we've got that consistency of the qualification, it means those people who've been trained in how to run these events, how to do it safely, and how to work within the normal jump programme. And then starting next year, if I haven't kind of had enough of all this and gone cried in a corner somewhere, then we'll be looking at how we develop the next stage, which is the elite or performance level coach. Now, in the other sports that we're working up with, it's the elite performance level is kind of looking at national teams. So people like your England managers, those sort of people are the elite performance coaches. That's much more around sports psychology, nutrition, fitness, individual psychology, team building, that type of thing, which is likely at this stage to be a level 5 diploma qualification. So for those that know the Ofqual framework, that's basically degree level, but actually work-based. So quite a high level of qualification to do that. And to support all that, we'll be having online communities, both on the British Skydiving website, where customers can actually look at who's got different coach qualifications, so they can got a choice of who they go to, but also networks for coaches to actually share information, share learning, and basically sort of chat amongst themselves about their next steps. So that will be run by British Skydiving and either on their social media pages or the actual website. In addition to that, as a training centre, I'll also be putting together CPD events and possibly seminars. And what I'd like to see going forward is that this time next year, we've actually got a guest speaker from another sport who's a high-level coach to actually come in and share some of their experiences. Now that's stuff for the future. And again, the idea of doing it here means that British Skydiving pay for it. Whereas if I run it as a CPD event myself, then I'm going to have to charge you for that to pay their time. But either way, it's a much more holistic and a much bigger role that we're expecting coaches to take on moving forward. And it's only right that we put the support networks in place for you to do that. So the other advantages of these is, as I mentioned briefly, when it comes to things like load organising events, at the moment they're a bit random and ad hoc. And I've been at DZs up and down the country and abroad where there's been big events organised. Some have gone really, really well. Some have been run really, really safely. Others have been absolute carnage. And 9 times out of 10, the person running it isn't from that DZ or PTO. They're somebody that's come in, organised a big group, and cracked on. And as a chief instructor, it's probably your worst nightmare when you're seeing people coming back with broken noses, blood streaming down their faces and all the rest of it from collisions on exit, all sorts of sort of shenanigans going on. And you've almost given up control of that because somebody's organised an event. The advanced coach bit will give the CIs that assurance that the person doing that has reached a base level qualification to be able to do that safely and understand how they fit in to support the safety management systems at that PTO. So hopefully it will help ease some of the burden there from the normal DZ staff. The development of the elite and performance coach bit, for me, is the bit that's probably the most important thing in all this. Personally, the biggest advantage I see of this is an improvement on the world stage. We've always punched above our weight as a small country at world level, and we continue to do so. But when you look at most disciplines, our averages haven't really changed that much over the last 10 or 12 years, or probably even longer. So 15 years ago, teams like Excel, V&E, VMAX were kind of hitting round about the 18 to 20 average. This year, our top 4 and 8-way teams are hitting round about the 20 average. We might have improved by 1%, but that's it. Despite having all that access to wind tunnels, coaching, development, funding, and yet we haven't improved that much. And I'd even go as far as to say that's probably the same across all disciplines. We've made improvements, but then so is the rest of the world. So for me, the proof of the pudding will be if in the next 10 years we actually start hitting those medals at the world meets, because we've actually got coaches that are homegrown that understand the importance of creating the environment to let our athletes grow and develop, rather than focusing on technique and how you can turn one of the blocks half a second quicker. So that's where I'd hoped this would go. So finally, I think I need some coaching on how to use IT. And there it is in all its glory. On the First of Sport UK coaching website, along with every other coaching qualification in the UK, there's ours, the Level 2 Certificate in Coaching Skydiving Foundation Skills. On there it talks about minimum age, total learning hours, when the qualification actually started from, and also an overview of it. One of the dangers is it now means that Nottingham Trent University can look at this, pick it up and go, I know, we're going to deliver that, and good luck to them. One of the reasons we've been able to do it, despite the fact it says 121 total qualification hours and we're doing a 3-day course, is because we recognise that in order to get to this stage, you've already done several hours of ab initio training, all the hours you spent getting qualified, getting your different grading stickers, getting your B licence, C licence, etc. So those pre-course accredited prior learning build up a lot of that 121 hours. The course itself consists of some online learning beforehand, so a bit of research for yourselves using the UK website, UK coaching website resources, and various tasks that you're going to do before you come on the course. So that's some more hours that we use up. And then finally the 3 days, roughly 8 hours a day of actually classroom inputs and practical sessions on coaching and then going and evaluating you. So that's the course in a nutshell. Like I say, Martin tomorrow will be going in a lot more detail around terminology, the journey we've been on, everything else. But what I wanted to do was just give you a bit of an overview and a flavour of where we're going with this and why. And I'm quite happy now to sort of take any questions if anybody's got any.
What are we looking at in terms of currency requirements for maintaining a rating? Will there be CPD requirements? What are the facilities and things in place for that?
Thanks, you've obviously read my notes and I've missed that bit out. One of the things about this qualification that's different to current ratings is this, for the first time, will actually involve you maintaining currency and completing a set amount of CPD per year. So continual professional development, so that can be either through demonstrating active coaching, will count towards that CPD, attending seminars, doing some reading from lots of really, really good articles on the UK coaching website, or even CPD events that we organise. So that CPD will go towards your annual renewal. It hasn't been bottomed out yet who's going to sign that off. At the moment, the burden looks like it's going to fall on chief instructors for yet another thing. Personally, as a training centre, I'm quite happy to sort of do that because I've got the records and all the evidence folders, so I can monitor CPD quite easily. That's something for SDC to decide. In the end, they're the ones that will decide if they want to take on that role or whether they're happy to devolve it. Thanks, Simon. Anyone else? No one's asked how much it costs yet.
What does it cost you?
Okay, and we've struggled long and hard this. Basically, we're looking at about £375 for the 3-day course. Now, on the one hand, that sounds like quite a lot. On the other hand, when you look at how much you spend on things like wind tunnels, various other courses that you do, it's actually not that much different. But also, when you look at what a formal qualification costs at your local college, it's probably 1 less than what they're charging. So that's the kind of ballpark. But that fee covers, first of all, your administration fee to register on the site, which is a one-off fee of about £55. Plus it covers administration costs for actually getting you all the sort of evidence assessed, everything else, and then the 3 days on the course, paying for the evaluators and the tutors' time to deliver the course.
So, you said about in-ear evaluations. What are we talking in terms of number of jumps? If we can't do them on that 3rd day, dates, you know, the logistics of that. Can they be done at home?
Yep. So the other part of this is the in-ear evaluations bit. It's 2 evaluation jumps for the discipline that you wish to have. So if you want to do more than one discipline on the same course, then that's an option. When you walk off the course at the end of that 3 days, you will not have the level 2 qualification, because there's a learner pack you need to complete with your evidence, which will then get submitted to me as a training centre to evaluate, sign off, and then pass it forward to Jeff for QA. And what we've decided is for this first 12 months, I want 100% of everything I do QA'd, and then in new training centres that come on board later on, they will go through that for their first year as well. And then after that will be a dip sample. So in terms of if you don't get the evaluation jumps in, because again, we know the British weather's not great, then that's not the end of the world. We can get the rest of your evidence done and then fit in the evaluation jumps with a tutor or an evaluator another time. You've actually got 2 years from the date of registration to be able to complete the qualification, which is really handy if you're a PTO that has apprenticeship schemes, because you can now put your apprentices through and give them a formal qualification that's recognised at the end, which helps with your apprenticeship levy. And the other nice thing about apprenticeships is it doesn't have to be new starters, it can be existing staff as well. So that's another option for PTOs to look at. That kind of wandered a bit off your question, but yeah, like I say, if you don't get the 2 jumps, it's 2 evaluation jumps per discipline. Any examiners in the room apart from me and Rich? And as an examiner, what we're doing this year, any examiners that wish to come and do the rating, we're doing a slightly modified version. You do the 2 days of classroom input, and we're accepting video evidence of your coaching in air for examiners only. And that's only for this year. And that's to help us get things rolling and get things off the ground.
This isn't feedback for you, Stu, at all. This is for the room. If anyone's got any questions or they're querying why this is happening, or I'm an instructor, obviously, but also been through this course now. I'm not an examiner. I don't represent British Skydiving other than as an instructor or what have you. But having been through this training And we were the first ones to do it, and we did feedback, and we said, this is helpful, this is not helpful, what about this other stuff? So it's been quite holistically looked at in our professional lives. We are coaches and senior managers and all those sorts of things. Rebecca works in health and safety as well as other things. So, and is chair of various groups at her work that support diversity and inclusion, safeguarding and all of those things. So it's had quite a rounded look. But I'm really interested to answer any questions anyone might have about why you would do this in the first place. Because I think, even though I'm a relatively experienced instructor and quite an experienced coach, I still learnt stuff, I still found it valuable, and I am going to change the way I have coached because of it. So if anyone's thinking that this is a waste of time and it sounds really expensive and why would you, that is a totally valid opinion, but ask the questions of the people that have been through it, because I think it's vital that we change how we approach coaching and instructing in skydiving. It's not the world it used to be. We're not all from the military. We need to change our approach along with the rest of the world. So shout, ask questions, be open, challenge it. Yeah, definitely, because it's the only way we all move forward.
A few military guys there getting a bit.
sorry, military people. Sorry.
No, and it's a good point. I mean, like I say, when we look at the BI courses, or PI courses as it was when I went through, that's how old I am. It was a very militaristic-based course. It was methods of instruction. It was, very much, state your aim, do your end lesson summary, all that sort of stuff, which is still valid. And, it's a good model to use. It doesn't fit when it comes to things like progression briefs. It doesn't necessarily fit when it comes to AFF, when we're working with individuals and we're trying to work with that individual and make their course tailored to them. And it also doesn't really work with adventure training. In fact, we got Debbie Ingle at the back of the room. I remember having a conversation with her one day, working at Netherhaven, when she said, why can't these guys get it? This is adventure training. Shouting and screaming at them isn't going to make them any less scared. And I thought that was a really good point. The whole point of putting people through this is they are going to be scared. So we need to deal with those kind of factors, and we need to sort of do it in a much more holistic and supportive way as coaches.
Josh, did you?
I'm just trying to understand if it's fully separate from regulation at the moment. So I'm kind of thinking from the advanced instructor side. Are we saying you would go and get this qualification, but unless you have an FS coach qualification, you would not be able to coach FS, or CP for CP? You would still need the standard coach qualification to be able to coach that discipline.
Okay, if you've got those ratings already as a coach.
It's not if you've got them already. What I'm asking is, if I went and got this qualification and I am not an FS coach, can I coach FS? Is it included in the qualification?
Right, so the way the course is set up is the classroom input and the theory side of it is standard. It's about coaching. It's not about teaching technique.
Yep.
And that's been something that's been a bit of a kind of mind game for a few people that have done the course. It's not about how do you do a side slide. It's about how do you identify what that learner needs by asking the right questions. So that part of it is the same. If you then decide that your skill set as an FS jumper matches your ability to coach and you want to do that, then you'd only need to come back and do the evaluation jumps. Alternatively, if you are somebody who's got multiple skills, multiple ratings and far more talented than me, and you wish to sort of do more than one rating at the same time, the 2-day input is the same. When it comes to your evaluations, we would tailor the evaluations to the disciplines you want to get. So for instance, somebody who's an FS coach who wants to also be a CT coach, then that would do it. That brings me on nicely to another point that we've looked at, because currently we have no CT coaches in the UK. We changed the rules from CP to CT. We haven't caught up yet. So any instructors that go through this will get their CT coach rating. So that allows them to coach up to CT 1 and 2. So student 1 and 2, because you're doing that already. So we'll sign you off for that. If you're not an instructor and you wish to do that, then you need to go away, learn the input, and then be evaluated on that. We'll also look at a slightly higher level of CT coaching for those that are what was CP2 coaches, of which we got a small number in the country. So for those people that want to get the formal qualification, then we would look at a I don't want to call it advanced, but a higher level of CT coach that would then give them that kind of remit to go and coach CT at that level. Andy.
Thank you. Would so there's going to be people in here with USPA qualifications, other organisation qualifications. Would that count towards this?
No. It won't even count towards this if you are a FA coach, an RFU coach, anything else, because it's all discipline specific. The USPA coach rating is a very different animal to this. And actually just recently I've been considering becoming a USPA examiner because it seems to be licensed to print money, but that coach course is more aimed at students in that transition phase and what we'd call consolidation jumps, teaching them their basic FS skills to stay alive rather than teaching them how to do good FS. So we deliberately haven't gone down that road. Other countries have got other kind of coaching qualifications that they call a coach qualification. This one is different because it's actually a formal qualification through Ofqual, so it has to meet a certain bar to give the evidence. So we can't do kind of APL transport across from other things, if that makes sense. In the same way that an AFF instructor, we wouldn't just automatically give them an FS coaching rate. They'd have to come and do the input.
This isn't British skydiving qualification. This is a first for sport qualification.
It's a first for sport qualification, and it's their standards that we're having to meet the Ofqual bar. So they're the ones that stipulate that no, you can't claim credits from other sports or even other organisations. It's been, as it says on there, what's the terminology? Technical content has been developed in partnership with the British Skydiving Academy and UK Coaching. I'm not sure we've got an academy, but yeah. And again, yeah, we had this question last year when Martin first presented it about, you know, I'm a coach in this kind of discipline and this sport and all the rest of it. Can we transfer across? And the answers come back from UK Coaching as to no. In the same way that somebody who gets this can't automatically go and coach basketball. But what it would do is you'd have transferable skills that once you've got their qualification, you'd be able to use. That's only because it's easier to get the mic from there to there rather than back and forth.
So when you come to do your jumps, who's assessing the jumping side?
So as a training centre, I have to nominate a whole range of staff. So the ultimate evaluation part for the whole of the evidence is done by me. And we set that bar at being an examiner, if you want to set up as a training centre. And then the evaluations are done by tutors and evaluators that I choose, I train, and I bring up to speed to do that. So with the best will in the world, I'm not going to be able to go and tell you how great a free flyer coach you are, because the only time I go free flying is if I'm doing AFF evaluations and it's unintentional. But at the same time, I can tell whether you're coaching well, if that makes sense. So what we would do, bring in discipline specific people to make sure the technical input that you're giving is correct.
Right, okay.
Just to go back to the multi-rated question, I'm a CF coach and FS coach. If I did one of these qualifications, say in CF, I go to a drop zone and I say I have this qualification. Can I coach FS? It doesn't necessarily mean my FS is up to scratch. What does that mean for the drop zone in terms of me turning up and being, here's my accreditation? Does it still count?
Okay, so your accreditation will actually state what disciplines you've got the qualification in. So on the British Skydiving website, it'll have a list of all the people that have done the qualification and what disciplines they're qualified to coach. You could still do that as part of your old FS rating that's current, but you wouldn't be able to use the qualification bit as a way to say to CIs, oh, look at me, I'm an FS coach, if that makes sense, because you haven't been evaluating on that. That said, if you wanted to do both of those on the same course, we could facilitate that with the evaluation jumps and the on-the-ground briefs and debriefs.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned instructor examiners, if they want to come get this qualification, you'd be happy to accept video evidence of their in-air coaching. Does that stand for AFF instructors as well?
So AFF instructors, again for this year, what we've done with the first cohort, if you're an AFF instructor, we've required 1 video minimum of you actually coaching the discipline you want to coach in. And what we haven't done is made you go through the whole of the on-the-ground briefing, debriefing part for that, and also the second in air qualification, because you've already been assessed at that on your course. So that's another. Now that's got to get passed. So again, unlike all our other qualifications, this one's actually externally accredited. So as well as me doing the evaluation overall and signing it off, Jeff then doing the internal QA, it then goes to an external QA to actually go off and check that we're meeting the standards. So that's the way we've proposed it at the moment, and providing they're happy with that, then we can do that for this year. We're going to have to call it at the end of the year, because basically what we don't want to be doing is 10 years down the line offering that same thing to people who've got their rating in between. We kind of need to sort of draw the line. But in order to get the ball rolling and try and get people, A, motivated to do the qualification, because like you say, if you're an AFF instructor, you're an examiner, you know, well, what's the point? But actually, you'll learn a lot from doing it. So as well as that side of it, we also want to get a core of people who understand the qualification, understand the ethos and where it's going, and are able to then sell that message to people coming through the sport. So, yeah, as an AFF instructor, then, you know, you will get a slight concession.
I think what the point I was trying to make is I can completely understand Vic and Bex's point of using this as a way to further your education and becoming a better coach. But it seems important to me, just from the regulation, keeping it simple paperwork-wise, that if someone was to tackle this course, they do their FS and the, let's say, tracking evaluations, they would still, am I right in saying, they would then become an FF coach on their membership certificate, as in the past? They would get the old qualification as well, is what I'm trying to get.
That's something that we need to discuss with STC. I've proposed that if you do this, you'll still have the old ratings, then that bit won't change. And to get around the fact that you don't get the qualification at the end of the 3 days, what I have said is I'm prepared to then sign up people's current style rating for their membership, so they can actually go out and start coaching straight away. That, again, has got to go through STC in a conversation with CIs as to whether that's acceptable to them. And again, something me and Martin are kind of discussing at the moment, because it's new. We're going to learn things as we go. It'd be great if this had been running for 5 or 6 years. None of those problems would exist. We'd have kind of ironed them all out. But because it is new, then we need to sort of like look at how we can facilitate some of those bits that we get over those first hurdles.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, I have got my diary with me, so if anybody is interested in actual dates, I can at least give you a heads up of what dates I can facilitate this year. Unfortunately, at the moment, I am the only training centre in the UK. Hopefully other people will come on board as time progresses and they kind of see what's involved. It's not an easy thing to do to set up to be a training centre, but you know, if it's something that you kind of believe in, then it's worth doing. And thanks again.